I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I dream of that place, the concrete dust, the bruised sky, the silence. It's been 3 weeks since I got back from my last run into the Warsaw exclusion zone, and I can still feel the chill of it in my bones. The filter on my water purifier was shot, and my last dose of antibiotics was gone. It was a run born of desperation, a trip I'd been putting off for weeks. I went in for supplies. I came back with a truth so much heavier than anything I could carry. A truth that I have to share, because keeping it inside feels like its own kind of damnation. The first 2 days were just survival, a grim routine I had perfected. The city is a tomb, and we are its ghosts, navigating the ruins left by the change, the cataclysm that shattered the world and birthed the horrors. I saw the creatures it left in its wake, the things we call the orphans, as I always had, as rabid, twitching obstacles. They were biological landmines, things to be navigated or disarmed. Their shrieks were just the soundtrack to the apocalypse, background noise to the grim task of staying alive. I was good at the game, efficient. I felt nothing but the cold calculus of ammo conservation and the familiar, metallic taste of adrenaline. On the third night, everything I thought I knew was fractured. I'd found shelter in the husk of a suburban home, choosing it for its defensible position. I cleared the lower floor, wedged the doors shut, and made my way upstairs. I settled in what must have been a child's bedroom. Faded rocket ships peeled from the wallpaper, and a broken mobile of plastic planets hung silently over a dusty, empty crib. Through a crack in the boarded-up window, I watched one of them. It was a big one, a hulking brute, moving with a heavy, unnatural gait through the overgrown yard below. My rifle was trained on its head, my finger resting on the trigger, but it hadn't sensed me, so I waited for it to pass. The sun was setting, casting long, skeletal shadows that made the world look even more like a corpse. And in the growing quiet, I heard it. It was faint at first, so quiet I thought it was the wind. But it grew, a sound almost lost beneath its own wet, ragged breathing. A tune, a broken, looping melody my mind, against all logic, recognized. A lullaby, hearing something so gentle, so intrinsically human, coming from a throat so monstrous. My blood ran cold. My first instinct was denial. I was tired, hungry, my mind playing tricks on me. But I kept listening, and the melody was undeniable. I lowered my rifle. The cold efficiency I prided myself on evaporated, replaced by a profound and horrifying awe. For the first time, I wasn't looking at a monster. I was looking at a cage. And I had the sudden, sickening thought. What exactly was trapped inside? I didn't sleep. I just sat there in that dead child's room and listened to the lullaby fade as the creature wandered off into the darkness. The next day, I pushed deeper. The lullaby had unsettled me, but supplies were still the mission. My path took me towards the old collective research outpost, a place I usually avoided. The journey there was a descent into a deeper quiet. The wind howled through the canyons of crumbling, brutalist towers, and the silence between those gusts was absolute. It felt like the entire city was just waiting for something worse than it's usual to happen. Here, the orphans were different, leaner, faster. They moved in twitching, unpredictable ways that spoke of a frantic energy the brutes lacked. I was forced into a long, agonizing game of stealth, slipping through labs filled with smashed equipment and overturned desks. I hid in a narrow maintenance locker for what felt like an hour, the metal cold against my back as one of them stalked the corridor outside. It made a hissing sound when agitated. I'd always dismissed it as a simple threat display. But huddled in the dark, my world reduced to a single sliver of light under the door, I heard it differently. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. It was a word. A name, mangled and repeated with a desperate electronic rasp. Veronica, where, Veronica. The name meant nothing to me, but the intent was unmistakable. Who was this creature? A husband, a brother, a collective scientist lost in the chaos his own people may have unleashed, his final desperate thought now calcified into a monstrous, eternal obsession. This wasn't just a leftover memory like the lullaby. This was an active, searching thought. The discovery left me trembling. The failing lights in the corridors would flicker as they passed, and the dead radios on the desks would crackle with a strange energy. Sometimes in the static, I could almost hear other things. Whispers of a world that was gone, fragments of music, the distant sound of traffic, a baby crying, phantoms in the machine. My journey devolved after that. The supplies became secondary. I was no longer a survivor on a run. I was a man haunted by a question. Who were they? The answer came on the fifth day, in a moment of pure, abject terror that I will carry with me to my grave. I'd made a mistake, got careless, and brought a horde down on me. I scrambled into a maintenance tunnel, pulling the heavy grate closed just as their claws scraped against the metal, sending sparks into the darkness. I was trapped. It was pitch black, the air so heavy it felt like I was underwater. And then one of them found a way in. It squeezed through a ventilation shaft at the far end of the tunnel, its bones popping as its form contorted unnaturally. I was out of rifle ammo, with only a pistol and a few precious rounds left. We were in there together. It couldn't see me, but it sensed me. I flattened myself against the cold, damp wall, trying to will my heart to stop beating so loud. And in that absolute, terrifying proximity, I heard its real voice, the frantic, rabbit-fast thump of its heart, a choked, wet sound like sobbing. This creature, this engine of destruction wasn't just a predator, it was afraid, as terrified as I was. In that moment, the roles reversed. I was the monster in the dark, the unseen threat. The horror of that terror, it almost broke me. I don't remember aiming. I don't remember firing. But I remember the shriek. In the enclosed space, it wasn't just rage. It was agony and surprise. The sound shook me so profoundly that when I finally escaped hours later, I couldn't get it out of my head. I have a small recorder on my gear, an old habit from my early days, a way to log my roots. That night, hands still trembling, I played it back. I slowed the recording, needing to understand that final, awful sound. And there it was. The scream, when stretched, wasn't a scream. It was a word, a human word, uttered with its last monstrous breath. Why, that single word was the key. It unlocked everything. The lullaby, the name, the sobbing. They weren't glitches. They weren't tricks of the mind. They were echoes of a trapped soul. The unspeakable truth of the change isn't that it killed people. It imprisoned them. The person they were is still inside, a conscious but powerless passenger in a body rewired for pure, uncontrollable agony. Every orphan is a ghost screaming inside its own machine. The final piece of this nightmare fell into place the day before I escaped. I was crossing a wide, desolate plaza when I saw two orphans corner each other. I raised my rifle, expecting a territorial fight, but they moved towards one another, drawn by some unseen force. And then it began. A violent, horrific twisting of flesh and bone, accompanied by the sound of snapping ligaments and wet, tearing muscle. I heard two distinct shrieks of agony melt into a single, deeper, more resonant sound of torment that echoed across the empty square. I wasn't watching a tactical problem. I was watching two souls, two prisoners, being smashed together. Their prisons, I thought, were being combined, their consciousnesses shredded and fused into something new and infinitely more horrific. I retched, scrambling back into the shadows, reeling from the sheer cosmic cruelty of it. I made it back somehow. The supplies I found will last me a few more months, but I am not the same man who went in. The journey back was a mess. I found myself avoiding them not out of fear, but out of a kind of pitying, horrified respect. My mission is no longer about survival. It can't be. Now, every bullet I fire isn't an act of self-defense. It's an act of mercy. Every orphan I put down is a soul I am finally setting free from a nightmare we can barely comprehend. This world is a graveyard, and I've become its groundskeeper.